Hello, my name is Jennifer Flynn, and I am the HMIS Administrator for the City of Boston, Boston Continuum of Care. Welcome to the 2017 HUD Data Standards Program-Specific Data Element Definition Training. This training is not meant to be a how to enter data into your HMIS system. This training is literally just about the data elements, what they mean, what the responses are, and how you should be asking the questions of your clients. Program-specific data elements are information about the characteristics of a client, services that are provided to them, outcomes throughout the course of their program enrollment. Program-specific data elements are data elements that may change over time during a specific program enrollment or during a client's overall homelessness. Because this information can change over time, program-specific data elements are required to be updated annually 30 days before or after a client's start date anniversary. This is especially important for HUD-funded programs, whether they be COC or ESG-funded programs, as this annual update data element directly impacts your annual progress report. Program-specific data elements help facilitate the data collection and reporting for a whole host of federal partner programs and their reporting requirements. This includes the HUD COC or ESG program, the Department of Health and Human Services PATH program, Veterans Administration's GPD, SSF or VASH program, Runaway and Homeless Youth, HOPWA, and it also collects all information required for the annual homeless assessment report. Boston has opted to require all program-specific data elements for any program that enters data into an HMIS. The following is a list of what you may hear referred to as the common data elements. These are the program-specific data elements that must be collected across all programs regardless of federal partner funding source. Some federal partner agencies may have additional program-specific data elements that you must collect, and that information can be found in the HMIS Manual for that specific program. The next few charts that you will see are pulled directly from the HUD HMIS Data Dictionary and Data Manual. They show you both the universal data elements, which are shown on this screen, and the program-specific data elements on the next. This chart tells you for who you should be collecting the data and at what point during their enrollment you should be collecting each data element. So again, this is a list on this slide of the mostly universal data elements. This chart is continued, and beginning with income and sources is your list of program-specific data elements. And again, this chart just gives you a quick visualization as to who you should be collecting each data element for and at what point during their program enrollment you should be collecting this information or updating it depending on which program. This slide here, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but these are the program-specific data elements that must be collected for all VA programs. There's a link here for the VA program's HMIS Manual. Please note that the VASH program has its own HMIS manual, which will be available on the next slide. This chart really here in this manual is for the SSVF program, whether it be rapid rehousing or homeless prevention, the housing choice for homeless veterans, and GPD, which is the grant per diem program. This page contains the link for the VA VASH specific program HMIS manual and also which data elements must be collected on VASH participants. And again, this slide here just details out the additional data elements that are required for all Department of Health and Human Services Runaway and Homeless Youth funded programs. And the link to the Runaway and Homeless Youth Program Manual is provided here for you. A special note that the Runaway and Homeless Youth Manual that is linked here on this page also provides some pretty in-depth information about consents for runaway and homeless youth and data sharing amongst runaway and homeless youth providers. So I would highly recommend that if you are a runaway and homeless youth provider that you take a look at this information. Here you can find the link for the Hopper program's HMIS manual and the chart detailing which Hopper programs should be collecting which data elements. I've copied a specific instructions straight from the Hopper program's HMIS manual here, and I am going to read this because it is very timely and important information. So the data collection requirements for Hopper programs. Formula and competitive programs may enter data into HMIS. Grantees that use homelessness or chronic homelessness in their program design as primary criteria for eligibility must use an HMIS to track the services for these homeless clients. Additionally, some competitive awards also require grantees to use HMIS per the grant agreement. While these grantees are required to use HMIS, all grantees, regardless of your target population for your program, are strongly encouraged to participate in the local HMIS or the equivalent to track beneficiary level data and outcome data. All Hopper projects using HMIS are required to collect the universal data elements and the select number of program-specific data elements, which are shown below for each program component. And again, if you are a Hopper program that uses homelessness or chronic homelessness in your program design or eligibility criteria, then you must collect data for that program and all clients in that program in an HMIS. If you do not use those characteristics as a program design criteria or eligibility, then you may use HMIS. We strongly encourage an agency that collects data amongst about one program in an HMIS that they really collect data about all of their programs in an HMIS. This page is for the PATH program. There is one PATH provider for the entire state of Massachusetts. So if you are not that PATH provider, then you probably don't really have to worry about this information. If you are this PATH provider, then there is a link here for the required data elements for your PATH program. And I would also just note that the PATH program has some specific instructions around contacts and engagements and referrals that you should probably be paying special attention to, and also just how that there is an understanding that some of that data elements are difficult to collect for that specific client population, and some ways to kind of mitigate some of those data collection challenges. Okay, now into the actual program-specific data elements. The first one that we will be collecting on all clients is their income and their sources, as well as non-cash benefits. So income source, income amount, and non-cash benefits are to be collected for all heads of households and all adults. This should be collected at project entry, at annual assessment, and again, that is within 30 days before or after their start date, and at project exit. The recommendation is that if a client begins receiving a new income source or does not receive an income source anymore throughout the course of their period, to go in and take an updated assessment at that point in time as soon as you're aware of that information, and not wait until the 30 days before or after their start date, because you may forget to update that information. A client can have multiple update assessments throughout the course of their program enrollment. When it comes time for annual reporting purposes, your APR will look at the information that is in that update assessment that was dated within 30 days before or after their anniversary. A few other special considerations on income sources and benefits. There was a change made in how the information was asked from the most recent data standards to this current data standards. Previously, you kind of just checked off all income sources that a client was receiving. In this iteration of the data standards, you must ask a client for each income source if they receive it or not. If they do receive that income source, then you are to record the regular recurrent monthly income amounts for that source. And again, what we mean by regular recurrent monthly is their standard paycheck. If they typically, or I should say untypically received, additional overtime on one week of 1 month, that's not a regular recurrent monthly income, so that overtime amount should not be captured. Some other considerations: if a child receives an income or a benefit and that income or benefit is used for household expenses, the example given is if a child's disability payment is combined with just the overall household income, then that income source and income amount should be recorded for the head of household. And then finally, if a child is in a family during the course of a program enrollment, that child now becomes 18 years old and considered an adult, a new update assessment must be completed for that child to now record what their income source and amounts and benefits are. And here's a list of the data collection elements for income and sources. As you can see, we are recording a date. That date is what day are you collecting that information? Have they received any income in the last month? And if the answer is yes, then you must go through and ask each question, ask the client if they've received each income amount, and then if they say yes, I've received earned income, then you are to record the monthly amount for that income source. And again, continuing on straight down the list. The final data element is, and in most HMIS front-end systems, there will be a button to auto-calculate what their total monthly income is based on the amounts that you enter on each individual income source. Same kind of theory with the non-cash benefits. You are collecting the date that you're collecting this information. Have they received any of these benefit sources? And then yes or no to each one. Health insurance is to be collected for each head of household and all adults in a household that is in your program enrollment. And just like all other program-specific data elements, it should be captured at program entry, at your annual assessment, and then at project exit. You should be updating any health insurance changes as they happen by taking an update assessment. And also, just like with income, if a child kind of ages into adulthood throughout the course of a program enrollment, then you must go back and update this information for that child as well. Again, here we're collecting which date we're collecting this information. Do they have health insurance or not? And if they do have health insurance, then just like with income sources and benefit sources, you're to ask the client if they received each type of health insurance. And the options are, again, Medicaid, which in Massachusetts is Mass Health, Medicare, State Children's Health Insurance Program, VA Medical Services, Employer Health Insurance, a COBRA, private pay, state health insurance for adults, Indian Health Services, other, and then to specify the other if they do not have it. Special circumstances, so with Massachusetts health insurance, if a client is receiving a subsidized health insurance through Mass Health, and that could be something like, and I'm probably blanking on the names, but maybe BMC Health Net Plan or Commonwealth Care, and there are a few other kind of state subsidized health insurance programs. Those are not actually Medicaid or Mass Health programs. Those would be private pay health insurance. Disability types. So the disability types questions are companion data elements to the overall disabling condition question that is a universal data element. Disability type should be collected on all clients, including children, and this is a Boston determination. It should be collected at project entry, annual updates, and at project exit. And we're collecting this information in order to be able to determine a client's special needs, which either contributes to their homelessness or would be a factor in which type of permanent housing program they may be able to receive services in. So some special considerations. Projects should be especially sensitive to the collection of this disability information with the clients. Be very mindful of client privacy during this interview process. And disability for children that are with adults should be based on what the adult says. One other note that we want to remember is, as we've stated multiple times throughout these HMIS data element training PowerPoints, is that all information collected in the HMIS is client self-reported and therefore is not a HIPAA covered data element. It does not mean that this is still not a special data element for special considerations around privacy and protection of client privacy and their health insurance information, but it is not a true HIPAA covered data element. Some other information that, again, HUD has deemed very important enough for them to put into their data manual, and that we've deemed important enough to pull out and specifically call out on these slides, is the question of if a disability type is expected to be of long, continued, and indefinite duration. And again, that piece of information is very important in order to determine if this disability is a true disabling condition and meets the disability documentation requirements or not. So if a disability is present and is expected to be of long, continued, and indefinite duration, the corresponding data element 3.8 disabling condition should also be yes, whether by manual data entry or in some systems automatic population, as this is the case with the front end of ETO software. If you answer yes to both of those questions, then yes, your disabling condition question will be kind of turned yes. It is acceptable for a client to answer yes to having a physical disability and also answer no, that disability is not expected to be of a long, continued, and indefinite duration and substantially impair their ability to live independently. Although a disability of such type may not qualify clients for programs meant for severely disabled people, and they may not indicate a disabling condition according to the Universal Data Element 3.8. Again, that is very important to note. If that disability type, whether it be a physical disability, a mental health disability, or a substance abuse disability, is not of long, continued, indefinite duration, does not impact a client's ability to live independently, then it is not a disability that equals a disabling condition in order to be considered chronically homeless. For residential homeless assistance programs, client intake as part of the program admission process must be separate from the collection of disability information in order to comply with fair housing laws and practices, unless this information is required to determine program eligibility or is needed to determine whether an applicant needs unit with special features or if they have special needs related to communication. Projects should be especially sensitive to the collection of disability information from a client under the age of 18, and in households with children accompanied by an adult, children's disability should be determined based on the interview with the adult in the household. So again, physical disability, information data is the date of the assessment that we're collecting this information. Yes or no, do they have a physical disability? And then, is that physical disability expected to be of long continued duration, substantially impacts a client's ability to live independently, and could be substantially improved by moving into suitable housing conditions. Developmental disability. For the purposes of these data standards, a developmental disability means a severe chronic disability that is attributed to a mental or physical impairment or combination that occurs before 22 years of age and limits the capacity for independent living and economic self-sufficiency. And then, is this disability substantially impedes an individual's ability to live independently and of such nature could be improved by suitable housing conditions? So in certain circumstances, chronic health conditions may also be considered a disability. That is determined if a chronic health condition is expected to be 3 months or longer in duration, is not curable, or will have residual effects that will limit daily living and requires adaptation and function or special assistance. Some examples of chronic health conditions include, but are not limited to, heart disease, severe asthma, diabetes, arthritis, adult onset cognitive impairments, including traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and other headaches, migraines, cancer, bronchitis. Again, these could possibly include, but it's not limited to these diagnoses. And just, again, it's expected to be of long continued duration and substantially impairs a client's ability to live independently. So again, fairly simple questions, but I think you guys are going to have to do your due diligence in truly documenting if a client does have a chronic health condition, and does that chronic health condition really meet the definition and the expectation for it to be a disabling condition. HIV/AIDS, and here is some very specific information here. So HIV/AIDS is the only HMIS data element that actually is a HIPAA-covered data element. And the reason for this is because HIV/AIDS is an exact diagnosis, and it is the exact condition, even if it is a client self-reported. So such information is covered by confidentiality requirements and should be recorded only when a project has the data confidentiality protections that conform to the HMIS rule, which Boston's system is pretty much streamlined and in line with all of those legal documents as they stand at this point, and as far as we have been advised by the lawyers and the HIPAA lawyers. So feel free to, take into consideration that the HMIS staff and the D&D staff are making sure that all of these conditions are met within the technology and the data structure. So again, just some information pulled out directly from the HIVAIDS Manual. HIV-related information is covered by confidentiality requirements, as in other areas involving sensitive or protected client information. Information should be recorded only when a project has data confidentiality protections that conform to the standards specified in the HMIS final rule to be published. These protections include agencies' policies and procedures and staff training to ensure that HIV-related information cannot be accessed by anyone without proper authorization. So again, the date that we're collecting this information, and does the client have a HIV/AIDS diagnosis, or they may refuse to give this information, or they don't know their information. Again, perfectly acceptable. And then is this expected to impede their independent living capabilities? Mental health problems, again, is mental health problem because this is client self-reported and because there is not an actual diagnosis behind it, is not a HIPAA-covered data element. Mental health problem, you are asking if a client has a mental health problem that may range from depression to a very serious mental illness. And the second accompanying question is really where we need to get into the nitty-gritty details of the very broad range of mental health issues that may be happening with our clients. And then if that mental health issue really is of severe condition enough that it constitutes a disabling condition and therefore can make somebody chronically homeless. So again, the qualifiers are of having to be of expected, long, continued, indefinite duration, substantially impedes an individual's ability to live independently, and of such a nature that the ability could be improved by more suitable housing conditions. Same thing on the substance abuse side as with mental health. Because this is client self-reported and it is not an actual clinical diagnosis, this is not a HIPAA-covered data element. And as with mental health, there are various ranges of substance abuse and various types of substance abuse. So first we'll be collecting, is it an alcohol abuse situation, is it a drug abuse situation, or is it both? And then if there is this kind of substance use problem, again, is it long continued duration and impacts their ability to live independently and would be improved by more suitable housing conditions? Only if this second question is answered yes, does this substance abuse problem constitute a disabling condition, and then qualifies a client to be chronically homeless. You must also be able to document this information, that it is clinically document that this substance abuse issue, as well as a mental health issue, is of the long expected duration. Domestic violence. Whether a person is a victim of domestic violence, we're asking this question in order to provide their appropriate services and to prevent further abuse, and then treat the physical and psychological injuries of the prior abuse. It's an important data element for safety for both the project staff and other clients, including the ones who are fleeing this domestic violence. As we're collecting this information, you're collecting the most recent experience that a client may have if they are recording that they are a domestic violence victim or survivor. So you'll be choosing yes if the person is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or other dangerous or life-threatening conditions that relate to violence against the individual or a family member, including a child, that has either taken place within an individual or family's primary nighttime residence, or has made the individual or family afraid to return to their primary nighttime residence. It is important to note that some federal reports only capture information on domestic violence victims that are currently fleeing that domestic violence situation, and that situation was not a past experience. So it's important to complete both pieces of this data element if you are a federally funded program. And again, some special considerations. Projects should be especially sensitive to the collection of domestic violence information and should implement appropriate interview protocols that protects the client privacy and their safety. What this means is really ask questions in a private location, make sure that they're not with their romantic partner. If you need to delay entering some of this data into your system in order to not disclose some kind of safety habit or safety issue, you feel free to do that. So again, here's the domestic violence questions as you will see them. Number one, is the client a domestic violence victim or a survivor? And then when did this incident happen? And are you currently fleeing at the moment from this incident? And again, there are some reports look at just question 2, are they a domestic violence victim and survivor? And then other reports, in particular the new guidance for the 2018 homeless census, is that HUD will only be looking at domestic violence victims that are currently fleeing that situation. So just keep in mind that if you look at different iterations of different reports, that the programming specifications have been updated and changed, so they may not necessarily be apples to apples across your reporting. So contacts are to be collected for heads of household and adults, and are essentially just your dates of contact with the client. It should be each interaction you have with a client. It's especially important for street outreach programs and PATH programs. that you, especially if you are a COC or PATH funded program, because you need to, in your annual reporting, be reporting on how many contacts you have with a client before you're able to do a true engagement with a client. So again, you should be recording the date and when the interaction happened. And again, this interaction does not necessarily have to be a scheduled visit. It can be a phone call. It can be a face-to-face meeting. Again, any type of interaction with the client to make a record. Date of engagement, again, collected for adults. The date of engagement is really the date on which an actual interaction with a client develops in a relationship that then results in a deliberate client assessment or the beginning of a case plan. Engagement really does come up, again, more on the street outreach side, and especially for federal partner funded street outreach programs, we are measuring, again, how many contacts, how many times do you have to sit down and have some type of a case management type interaction with a client before you can establish a trusting relationship with them to really get them on a housing path or even on a shelter path if they are a street outreach client, and really make the conscious decision to do an assessment with that client. Some special kind of thing, right? So you can only have one date of engagement during an entry and exit enrollment. It really is like that's your date of engagement is the first time that you've got a substantial relationship with this person, that they're really willing to sit down and answer your assessment questions as you move forward. Bed night date. This is only applicable for emergency shelters that use a night-by-night data collection system. And again, it's a very finite set of programs. And again, it is literally just the date each night a client comes in to take a bed in your shelter. Most of your HMIS systems are kind of programmed to use client barcodes and scan cards and ID cards and do a swipe in, and they get their date automatically for their bed nights each night. Important to note that in emergency shelters that do use a night-by-night tracking method, the length of stay of a client is the sum of the bed night dates. We do not use an entry date or an exit date in order to determine a client's length of stay in those programs. We are literally just totaling up how many nights they've spent there in the system. Housing assessment disposition. This is a fairly new element that came about, and it's really being used as part of the coordinated assessment system. Should be collected on all heads of household at project exit for coordinated entry projects. So there's the key right there for the coordinated entry projects. At the moment, there is only one coordinated entry project in the city of Boston, and that is the CAS program, which is managed internally by D&D, and it's really more of an operational grant, just like the HMIS is. But really what this housing assessment disposition question is that we're looking to get at is, right, where are we referring the client to? Even though your program may not be the true coordinated entry program, if you are a fronter triage type program, we may leave this data element in your assessments just to be collecting it. It is barely duplicative of the universal data element destination, in that it's more of bucketing out the different types of destinations, right? Destination gives us a little bit more detail as the type of situation where they went to, whereas this housing assessment disposition just allows us to bucket out that folks maybe have just been referred to a permanent housing program. So again, that concludes our 2017 HUD program-specific data element definition training. The link to the 2017 HMIS data standards can be found here on this page. And again, please contact myself, Jennifer Flynn, the HMIS administrator, or Kadra Adderley, the HMIS coordinator, with any questions or concerns you may have. Thank you.